Well, it's that time of year again. Time to design the High School Musical. And this year, as you could see by the title of this video, we're going to build The Little Mermaid. So I've done some initial sketching here, and if you look back at Shrek from a couple years ago, you'll notice that I built some kind of cool rolling tree trunks. So maybe that's a better place to start. One of the things that I try to do when I build the show is if I'm making an investment of any kind, because of course we got to be careful about the cost, is there a way to do that where it can be to maximize the opportunity to be leveraged later? Because if we're going to have to finish something for a considerable cost, let's try to leverage that investment as much as humanly possible. So several years ago was Shrek. No, that's somebody who wanted to. There's Adam's Family. Here, Shrek. So we'll touch on that too. Where the hell are you, Shrek? Was it all that long ago? Perhaps it was. Here it is. So, for that show, and you can look at my catalog on YouTube, my video series from that show, I got sonotube for concrete pouring. I got it for a good price, secondhand, and I made some typical or simple plywood scooter base, and I used baking pans to put the heavy-duty casters in so that we could bring that, the caster could mount up into the pan, and thereby the, scooter could come down really close to the floor, and then a sort of, lofted down that root ball shape, or lofted it up actually, because the scooter was made with the root kind of ball shape. And it was a prototyping process. I thought we were going to need these rope weights in there because, it's going to need to be real bottom heavy. And it turns out we don't need them in there at all. So if you're going to use that series, something I haven't gotten back to add as far as information, these are extremely stable without that steel brick in them, without several steel bricks in the bottom, with no counterweight of any kind. You can't get to a high enough point to get enough leverage, especially against the rolling base. And I certainly deliberately tip them over for storage or moving or, to operate on them. But it just takes, it's relatively easy, but you have to absolutely mean to tip them over. And in some cases, you need two people to get it done. It just will run away from you all day long. Even if you stop it, you'd be hard pressed to tip it over. So I'm really pleased with how these tree trunks came out, but considerable investment. So we got other stuff from that show, but we get down here to the way that they were finished out with crinkled paper to look like bark. And you know what I mean? They ended up, it was a black base coat and a quick dry brush to catch the, texture. That's the thing. Rather than illustrate, we just made the crinkly paper, texture, and ended up leveraging that with, I was stressing faculty out over the fact that they hadn't gotten their paint job, that they were just black. And then I think, I don't even know if it was opening night or something. I just did a quick several mud colors in different roller trays and a foam texture roller, actually, just so that I didn't get any unnecessarily inorganic, like solid color patches. It was going down with a textury roller. It was going down onto texture, and I was using several different colors. So, but you see that one side of these largest trees we utilized to end cap Dulux facade, and so I kept them smooth, and I didn't put the root ball contours on that one half side. And so things like interior Dulux, we utilized them there, and obviously on that facade for exterior Dulux, and as well as like catacombs. I had some metal. I put some sheet metal around the front edge, and we created these cardboard panels that have some rare earth magnets so that could stick on there. And really, now you can kind of compose anything in cardboard and stick it on there quickly with a scene change blackout. And they had these nice heavy dowel pegs with it's like a big washer that's bigger around than the peg, and then a nice heavy screw goes through everything. It's really secure. However, you notice we can have these two-sided banners that just have a big opening, so they just go up and over the thing really quickly. They go way up high on there and they look correct, but you can walk up as a crew person with your hands on the lower corner, even a relatively short crew person, and put that up there, or flip them around where the other side had the F on them. And you could certainly have a bunch of different other things. So, tons of versatility for that show. And furthermore, we went on to do other stuff with it. More recently than that, I think it was once on this mattress where they brought him out on stage again. And this was a middle school show, but they have no budget for the set, but these are still hanging out, right, from a few years ago. So I came out and did a little more construction. I meant to make this into some kind of a series. I guess I could throw it together at some point here. I did a quick circular construction that was a full crenellated top. That's the underside, actually. And then I cut it in half here and notched it out. And so then, you've got one half for the one side of either one of these, and kind of, together it made a great, I think it was like a proscenium. They left it right out there on stage left, stage right, kind of downstage, tucked in next to the wall. But it finished the top of those. Now, right, it would have been great to have that for Shrek to put on the the Duloc facade, where it is outside and ostensibly the top. But, for interiors, it wouldn't have looked right, really, in my opinion. And, a quick change with that isn't necessarily possible. Right now, the way I put that on there was I put a big construction screw through the center of every one of these. That's a 2x4 at the back of that. And it was kind of by design, so I had something solid to utilize, to attach. Could it become something that's quick and easy? Yeah, because it's very light. They are extremely lightweight. They're skinned with cardboard, and they've got these 1x1 little sticks. And there are full 2x4s, but interiors, and it's one piece of Luan across the top, as lightweight as humanly possible. And, furthermore, you could set up a 2.5-inch hole saw and core at least twice or even 3 times out of every one of these 2x4s to take a bunch of, at least another couple pounds out of them. So they're mysteriously lightweight for what they are. Almost as good as making them just out of solid styrofoam. So there's that aspect to them now that we won't, I don't think, be utilizing for this show, but that's another way to look at the versatility. And I've actually established that I think if we were to take the wheels off and either set it flat on the floor or attach it to something a little bit bigger, to be absolutely sure, even though I would be pretty confident even without doing that, I could put a small doorway opening into this and build in a ladder up inside of it, and someone could go up the ladder and come right out the top of this and look over and down. If you were doing like Spam-A-Lot or something funny like that, it would be pretty safe. I could absolutely make it very safe, and it would be really fun, I think, for it to stand alone. And rather than having a big ship ladder or something that you had to kind of hide, you could go right up inside of it very easily. That's a 30-inch diameter. So again, things down the road to leverage more versatility. I don't think I did stage Matilda in its final form. We didn't use it in the show, but I felt that it was a cool look when I did photography. When I got photography of their home, I had them in here adjacent. So they make great props. They were a really good investment. So now we're going to do Little Mermaid. And I'm thinking another spectacle type show. We need a lot of drama. You notice I went up as high as humanly possible. Those are exactly 14 feet tall. So it was 12-foot sonotube. And then I got some, I consumed one or pieces of each. I had some extras and some shorter lengths of each diameter. And I added 2 feet to all of them for Shrek, because the portal drop that we had foliage across the top, that put them right up and out of sight behind that foliage. And before I added the 2 feet, I had done all that texturizing and stuff like that. And we were watching the show at TAC, and I was going, it doesn't work because they don't reach up into the foliage, and you can't bring the drop in any further because it bunches up on the floor. And, I was freaking out about it. So anyway, they're extremely tall, as tall as we could possibly be here. And I think that I want to utilize them and rely on them for Little Mermaid here. So now that we've covered that, here's the scenario. These are the spaces that are kind of major spaces in the show. And the way that I'm going to do them, I think, because there's duality here. There's Triton's court, essentially, the king's court. So I've got what looks, like a throne. Everything's kind of coral. And there's, you can kind of see those big columns in here. There's some Triton banners, and maybe we fly a few more in on a bar. Then we've got Ursula's lair. The duality in silhouette is fun. Totally different, like lighting colors, finish colors, forms, some smoke I show coming out, for that kind of scenario. And then we've got Ariel's grotto. Once again, similar, however, significantly different enough. And I've got different columns being utilized here. I've got two different sizes here. These two utilize the same size. And so that's, an important way for me to kind of gain a deep undersea vibe, in the same way that being tall tree trunks gave us a big forest. I want to feel that we're under a lot of water. And so the idea that these go up and out of sight, I think, subtly communicates that. And they're independent and they roll in and out. And so this piece in the center is actually a three-sided, from above it would be a triangle kind of turntable shape, where the throne and a few stairs, like a dais, it's kind of additive to that, and this big mirror and some human chests and human stuff in Ariel's grotto are all additive. But I think in Ursula's lair, I'm pretty sure that I'm going to utilize the core volume of this triangular three-sided thing, and allow her to be in there and come out from inside, the way an octopus is generally jammed into some rocky crevice. And that's what these are, kind of tryptophobic pockets and lumpy, bumpy things, and to give it that aspect. And again, utilize all the opportunities that we have. I hate to have that volume and never get inside of it. So I think that's where we'll use that. And there's also a chance that this thing, and I was talking to my wife about it, occurred to me today, that it could be taller. The central piece doesn't have to be columnar in silhouette exactly like that. I could bring superficial facade components to the three-sided turntable up, and even break up what these are in two column kind of shapes, and just make it one sort of large, tall backdrop done by, building that up. But instead of going out really far with it and trying to give it dimension, we'll, use those columns to supplement what it is that I'm going to build here. And I think that's going to be really effective. You'll see more in 3D how that makes sense. You could do all of this and just leave those tree trunks as tree trunks, and just not use them. But I think we're going to leverage them to a huge amount here in this way. And so I show some other stuff here in Ariel's grotto. We've got some furniture, and I show a grandfather clock or whatever. We got way too much stuff like that we'd pretty much never use, that I would like to cut them off at the legs or at the base at a slight angle, and give it the impression that it's kind of jammed in the sand, and this is all kind of, soft, where these other spaces have got more of a floor. And then we get right into the ship, being on the ship and being outside of it, where the surface of the stage is the ocean's surface. And we've got like a big rock here for Ariel to come up and out of the water in this view. And we're looking at the bow coming at us and the ship's wheel. And we need some things that are telltale, silhouette. So we've got the curving hull, and we've got some kind of balustrade, and again, the ship's wheel. Now, I've parked one of the small tree trunks. I'll finish that on one side. Probably try not to disrupt the texture. Probably all of the changes that we make to the look of the tree trunks, I'm going to try to keep that bark texture in there, available for down the road. If I could build something up on the outside to transform it and make that thing something that can be taken away and utilized again, or some parts of it taken away, and the skin that we put up, if it's just simple paper, to be easy, the investment in the supporting shapes, and then use the new skin this year, rip it off, but save those supporting shapes and kind of put them back, in the future, keep them around. Some, there's a name for these. They go out to the side to theoretically support the sail, and park it behind this set piece. Now, the set piece itself, only 2 or 3 feet wide, so we can go right off between the legs and right back on. pretty typical theater trick. We don't need a lot of actual depth here, just enough for people to safely stand on there and possibly pass one another, which adds visual interest, okay? We could go out to 4 feet and kind of get away with it. That was the depth of Matilda's house, and it still went off between the legs and came back. Now, for Shrek, I brought in the roof of Fiona's tower, that Rapunzel kind of tower. We brought in that roof and took it back out, and it has some dimension. It's kind of a 2.5 D, what looks like a curving shingle roof, but it is easy to fly out. Again, put it right back up. It was lightweight, and it will hold out some kind of ruffled, rouged white canvas to imply the sail, and then we don't have to bring that in very much. Just coming in with it enough to imply the sail for the ship and taking it back out will do wonders. So we're flying in that. We've parked this post with some outriggers or whatever on it right behind this set piece. The set piece itself has got some kind of a built-in escape ladder or something on the back, so off stage we can get onto it and back off again easily, and it comes right out and goes back, away. And this basking rock, same kind of thing. Then, again, this is the water surface. If we turn the set around for a different number and it comes back out or goes off or does a pirouette on stage, I'm not sure how the show exactly stacks up right now. If we turn it around, we've got these lower stairs that we built for Adam's family. We utilized one of them for Matilda, so we keep that stuff together if we can. And so pulling them into either side gives you the appearance of the stage being the ship's deck now. And I can bring this, what's supposed to be a mast, around to the front, park it here, right in front of the ship's wheel, as it kind of physically would be, no problem. Keep the sail or bring the sail back in to some point in front of it, and we're on the ship now on stage. And we've got levels and stairs, and we can come and go off the sides, and we can be in the ship and out of the ship using the same set piece. Now, up here, I think this is where we have to crash the ship, and so I show some kind of art style on a water kind of splashing. We'll do the same thing on the rock to tie the look together, and we may do it elsewhere in the show to really tie that look together. But that piece will sit along the floor and, and roll out with this set. However, the rest of the deck and what looks like the hull, I'm going to have a high pivot here so it's safe and doesn't want to necessarily tip, and some counterweight, but it'll be something that crew can take a pin out, a draw pin out behind it, so the crew will have to hang out behind this when it's on stage. So it's safe to walk around on with the pin in. They quickly pull the pin, and then this will pivot about that point to some safe degree, but visually enough, and the water will make it so that this, probably Luan, the bow, is, not tight to the stage floor by 6 or even 8 inches, maybe 10 inches. And it hides behind that water, but that way the whole thing can come down to where that's almost touching the stage and appear to be rocking in, again, where the stage is water. So some visual trickery here, some planning, along those lines. Again, it can be pinned, you turn it around, the other side of it is just kind of faced, or has maybe what looks like the captain's, a door into the captain's offices or whatever that are normally at the back. There's, a term for that built-in house that's at the back of the ship, although maybe it's at the front of the ship. Anyway, some details there. Then we've got to be at the palace on land. And this is where, with these columns, this is the largest column, the white face that's smooth and was utilized as a stone tower in Shrek, and we utilized it again in once on this mattress. It's got the magnetic attachment points, and so this is where we can make corals and lay something out on cardboard, bright and colorful, bigger, much bigger than those bones, but stick them on, take them off quickly, and hang up Triton's banners, but take them off quickly. And this side of the turntable for Triton is also very corally and lumpy and bumpy, and so that all works here. But if we were to come out, and I'll get into what I'm doing with these here, but if we come out with those same pieces without that stuff, they're relatively smooth still, and they've got the hanging points on them, so maybe we put some artwork or pictures here. But we've got this rolling door that I've built a long time ago. It's a rolling single door. Park it in between and build over to those columns so that it can kind of come together in 3 pieces and go away. But that will give you a sense that the palace has got this architectural column thing happening inside. This is clearly a relatively private door. We could bring some artwork or something in on the bar in a chaise lounge. I think she has to have a tub and stuff, and that kind of Ariel's quarters within the palace. That'll work well to imply that. Same columns, and none of this is real tight yet, but go left, go right with them, and between the two contact points, a string of pots and pans or knives or something, we've come out with a stick with a magnet, and give something like this, make it all really lightweight, but give it a steel ring on either end that's quite big. It'll go over that hang point again, and you just come out with Crew's got that steel ring stuck to the magnet ends of the two sticks. They can reach up quick and hang that on over there. Just leave with the stick, the magnet lets go as long as you do it correctly. Put something like that up quick in a blackout and pull those apart so that it looks right. Get it on its spike, and it creates kind of a portal, and it fleshes out this kitchen, but we're still in the palace because architecturally speaking, it's the same finish, the same form. We're just moving around here. Same deal for the banquet. Again, pull that down quick, put whatever kind of banner art for the palace yet to be determined, could be up on these, bring them in at thirds or something like this and fly in another big piece of artwork or something. Then the action happens at the table, the chairs, all of that. And then for a ballroom location, we could just back them off. And again, whether we utilize their positions for these scenes, we may change that. But the idea is that moving them around, we move around the same architectural interior because the cues are the same. And quite obviously, we're using the same pieces, but we're getting a lot of versatility out of that. And, I didn't have to construct these. So these spaces have very little to be fleshed out, and they can get this stuff on the stage and be moving it around and working around it with blocking practically immediately, which is a huge boon to the quality of the show in the end. The earlier they can block around stuff, the more comfortable the cast becomes with it, the better. My time and energy is going to be it will be largely in this ship piece. And some of the other factors in this show is it's all really easy to sketch out like this where you can reach everything, but getting up and accomplishing things up and away that are kind of harder to do can become a little bit challenging. So, that may become a component. It's always kind of a component to building this set. Is easy to plan, but in getting to that height and getting things constructed there, the nice thing about these is that they'll lay down. And so back to what we're going to do here, this is the two medium tree trunks, and this is one of the mediums and the other small one that isn't the ship's mast, right? Because I want to utilize all of them. I could, the two large will only kind of work on the one side, because if I were to make the other side lumpy, that would be appreciable from this side, and it would break up, it would be distracting in the palace. You could always black stuff like that out. In a worst case scenario, you can black things out and it gets a pass in theater, but I really try not to do that. So because I want to see these as kind of pristine, above water, land-based, typical architectural stuff, I'm going to do all the lumpy coral things that we're going to do with them in a visual application, the cardboard sticking it on. Now these mediums and this one small, I'm free to enlumpen or otherwise break up that silhouette. I want to see big, chunky stone kind of shapes happening, and that's where I've got to come up with some type of additional kind of lumpy ring, the way that the root ball kind of happens, but 2 or 3 for each of them, and apply that, and then loft between them with more wrinkled paper, wrinkled in a different fashion, quite likely rather than vertical wrinkles, which I talk a lot about in Shrek to get the right texture for bark, quite likely get cracks and creases and wrinkle it all up and roll it and crunch it all in a way that plays out more horizontally or even at a helical kind of spirally wrap happening, and sit some areas of it way out. And again, probably getting from the higher lump to the next higher lump, and then sit the other stuff way down in, and maybe even try to get it to reach the bark inside there. But again, try not to mess that all up. And then the nice thing is I can spray a lot of heavy black paint, which gives that paper even more body when it dries, and then some dry brush, and and in that way we can get down to something that's more like this. Do the same thing to the smaller tree. And so that's what I kind of have planned here for those items. And again, maybe this turntable will have a different kind of final shape. I wanted to run this by everybody else who's involved, director and musical director and stuff, because it has a bit of a repeated silhouette. And I was saying, we can go left, we can go right, we can go up, we can go down stage with it. It is made of those columns, and I'm going to break them up some, but sometimes it can become boring if you do too much of this. Sometimes it's really elegant to realize the duality of like a good character and a bad character, and the silhouette's very similar, but this is obviously finished in a way that makes you feel like, who we're looking at is our good guy, and then we've got our bad guy here. And this is kind of an indifferent space. But again, if you recall the Disney movie, it's quite a vertical space, up and up and up and up and down, down. And that's where this actually all came from, is that grotto in the movie, because there's 3 dimensions underwater that you can utilize, it went up and up and up. And so that's where I started, is actually with the grotto being built that way with those columns. And there's some things in the Broadway show where I believe they fly, the ship is about like this, and they fly it in and out on a bar, and the people go in and out with it. And the thing is, to look at that, it looks, when they go up and out on it, it looks like we're moving down and underwater. So we can't do that on our production. However, I think we're going to be crafty, in any case. And so with this being said, this is a real early sketches. They're always fun to look at as compared to the way things actually play out. But at this point, let's do some material testing and see what that's going to look like. So one of the things I'm going to look for up here at my place, I've got all kinds of, stuff like this that's free and laying around, but it isn't really, it's like half a toroid. So it's like the inner half of a big donut. And if I needed a big toroid, I could make a simple arc all the way around the outside and skin this thing with paper or something. It'd be a lot faster to create a big donut or a big toroid, if necessary. A lot of the work's been done. And so since I have some room for crap to be stacked up and kept, I have got some stuff like that. Could it be a cool coral shape? Maybe. And I've got other type things, but I think I have domes. I'll show you what I want to do is form some coral. Yeah. It's bigger than I thought it was. That's what she said. So I knew I have a smaller one. Okay. Thought I had random domes. You got to have yourself some domes, folks. Okay. So I won't need, it may be worth having to, I don't know. I know where to get one if I need one. So I'll take these down. But what we're going to do here is we'll utilize some plastic, probably a garbage bag actually, and cover these. And it won't have to be perfectly smooth or anything, but it will give us a positive form. Okay. And then we'll utilize some spray foam and from the can, great stuff. And we'll build some kind of corally forms. And then when they set up, we can pop it off and peel the plastic. They'll let go of that plastic. And we'll have some kind of hemispherical, 3-dimensional coral forms. I've also done some on a flat thing. And, we'll just play around with that and see what types of stuff we can get. We'll also look at some reference. I've got other sort of jugs and shapes. And, we'll see how that does or doesn't help us. I got that much kids, what do you call that? Slide. I don't think it's going to be needed for this show, but it has got some interesting forms. Again, 1/4 of a toroid again, and things that you never know. You may just come up here, throw some plastic, drizzle some great stuff, come back and pull that piece off. And when you take it away, paint it and apply it, the amount of dimension that you get from something like that, and it's so lightweight, and it's $5 worth of foam, So, we want to utilize that type of thinking because, again, spectacle, a lot of organic things. And if you do it with anything heavier than foam and super thin, papers and fabric and little sticks of wood and cardboard, it gets out of control pretty quickly in terms of weight. And so we want, to do everything that we can to think about that, but we can't be spending a lot of money. So let's take these down and see what kind of coral stuff we can build. For right now, we may come back and get some stuff, but for right now, this is what we need. And you just got to have stuff. Sometimes you got to have a bunch of old horns and, brass instruments that's from RJD2. This is in there because it's the same type of thing. I got a bunch of those holiday brass horns at a garage sale, which you never know. Actually, I think for Seussical, all of the butter battle, soldiers or something, we use those. Anyway, but the trombone stuff and the bigger stuff at the bottom, that was all from RJD2. Descended from Myth is the music video. So check that out. It was supposed to be like take place in an art gallery where there's a big three-dimensional piece of art on the wall made of all different kinds of musical instruments, and we puppeteered it and made it look like it was playing his song, and that's the footage for his music video. So RJ's a cool dude. We also did Let There Be Horns. We built that Minotaur for that video. That was like long ago. Anyway, you just got to keep some cool things around. We've got personal stuff, but also largely just, you never know when you might need some of these things for a show. I guess real quickly, speaking of which, this is a case of heavy blow molded plastic exterior quality bollard covers. So you pour up concrete with sonotube, ironically, and sink the right sized pipe into it. And normally you fill that steel pipe with concrete as well. So that's sticking out of the ground for kind of crash protection, anything delicate that you want somebody to back into with a forklift or hit with their car if you can help it. And then these are built to zoop over that and doll it up. And they're like $250 each. They have this built-in loop, and they've got plastic chain. So when you back off and you chain them all up, which I've got all the chain, it looks really nice. But they're lightweight, they're uniform, they're all black to start with. So if you got to do a paint job for a stage production and it gets chipped up or banged, all that black chipping is almost always perfectly fine. And sometimes it even looks good. Whereas if it were white or a light color, then you end up with weird problems. So fundamentally excellent situation. All of these, they needed $100. They'd been on Facebook Marketplace for like a year, and just a local restaurant had been using them to change parking around for different events. And, they'll be here with the cockroaches after the nuclear holocaust, but they just didn't want to store them anymore. And so we used them, a few of them, for all different things in all different types of shows. In Addams Family, we go to the park. So this has got the type of look of, being at the park. Any number of municipal spaces that you don't want to build a lot of stuff, a couple key things like this will sell it visually. So here are all my plastic bollard covers. Did I say I got all of those for $100? So there you go. Oh, and this rolling hospital chair that I think they just threw away from the nursing home because it has this cut. You can use clear plastic packing tape on a problem like that before it's shrunk down like it has right now. I did have to put some nicer casters on there. Got those from McMaster casters, but they're smooth rolling and quiet, and it makes a great dentist chair for Little Shop. It made a great hospital chair for the beginning of Matilda when she's born, and with this and a couple other simple things, quite obviously at the hospital. A lot of shows use a wheelchair. I think this is a little bit different and a little bit better in that situation. So again, sitting by the side of the road, still smells like a nursing home, but that's the type of thing that's super high quality, all stainless tube. Everything's super nice, very safe, secure, tip it back, yada, yada. There you go. All right, so one of the things I'll mention is that the type of foam that you would choose makes a difference. One of the cool things about Great Stuff is that, so when I was a kid, I wanted to use some great stuff like you wouldn't believe. I wanted to do the old volcano for vinegar and baking soda, terrain, diorama type stuff with it. And I've said this about the special tapes that I wasn't allowed to use because my uncle painted and had special masking tapes on the farm growing up. But the Great Stuff was new at that time. The Great Stuff, it was expensive. I had to look at what it used to be and see if that's adjusted for. This was in the 90s, so a few decades ago. But there was only the one type, the classic. This is, do I even have any? Here it is. Nope, that's fire foam. So that illustrates my point. You got, God, I can't even get in here. Construction. This is my son's nursery, believe it or not, under construction. So, there's Pest Block that's got something in it that tastes badly or hurts their teeth. There's just black. Then there's the black colored Pond and Stone, which has got something that won't, it's not poisonous at all. So it's been, you can count on it to be. So a lot of Serpa design, I think his channel, and all that like build your own terraria type stuff, that's what they are using now. Fire block is required by code. The big gap filler kind of swells up more. Loctite brand, and I think the patent came up, so there's Loctite. There's Touch and Foam, which is DAP, I think. Great stuff is the trade name, that's become ubiquitous or whatever, like Kleenex. Window and Door, which doesn't expand as much and doesn't deflect. Window and door installations that are all perfect because, it was a great idea to start using that foam around there, but the original formulations were deflecting the jams and screwing the door and window function all up. When it was all cured, it was all frigged up. So they created Window and Door for that reason. And there are others. So anyway, which we'll use the Window and Door, I think, because the cured form of Window and Door is the softest and most flexible for the longest. I think they all kind of go downhill over time, whether they're off-gassing or leaching or oxidizing, or if moisture plays a part. I think moisture has the biggest thing with urethanes, which is what these are. So it's a foamed urethane. So I think the humidity takes the biggest toll. Once it's in place and it's doing its job as insulation, no problem. But for our purposes, if we're building coral, and it's going to get bumped and banged and it's going to have little spindly tips and nibs and nubs, then it'd be nice if it just kind of bent and didn't go and just break off everywhere. Because again, with things that are black through and through, if I were to use the black foam, it would be probably a little more fragile. However, anything even on the show night or even before the show, anytime if it were to get broken or snap off and it's black on that surface, no problem. I probably don't even have to address it. Okay. And so that's a nice thing to kind of consider if you're not going to be able to put your hands on to make repairs and things might get broken. But for early testing purposes here, this is one full can. It's probably $6 or $7 now for the Window and Door is kind of the most expensive. However, this is kind of interesting, although it's flat. So the next thing would be, throw some stuff on the table and throw the plastic over for a type of coral like this and build it onto that dynamic form, and then when it comes off, it'll kind of still have that dynamic form. So we'll see, about making it up on a flat surface versus something curved. And the domes that I went and got, I got the one here, and it's okay, again, that it's not perfectly smooth. I got the other one over here, again, just bunched it around there. You're going to have an easier time with like a 1 or a 2 mil like painter's plastic. It'll lay down better. The thicker the plastic, the more trouble. And sometimes maybe that's what you want. So, I might have done this over that. I tried getting the contractor bag over there. Not only did the corners keep fighting with me, it's just a bit bigger than a contractor bag, will loosely slide over it. So I went this route. I've got all kinds of stuff. If I use the domes for this now that I've had them for 15 years, I think the sticker on the one said $5. So what a great buy that's been. If I get this use out of it. So let's do a little different type of coral onto these and see how that turns. A couple additional things. My wife got me this beautiful Banana Republic black cable knit cardigan for Christmas, which I love. She just gave it to me. And you should know, urethane in general, but especially urethane foam, if you get it on something, one of the things you don't want to do is touch it until it's cured. Because if you can just leave it there until it's cured, a lot of times you can pick it off. The attachment isn't all that good. If you smear it or touch it or bump it, intentionally or otherwise, you'll drive it into fibers or any other kind of texture on anything, and it'll be even more, like wildly more attached. Especially if you get it on your hands, you really don't want to have gloves on, and you're just never washing it off. It's a two-part. It's a chemical reaction that's happening, and once it's become the plastic or the foam or the rubber that particular urethane formulation is designed to do, you're all done. Not going to dissolve it. You're not going to get anything to happen. So you want to wipe it right off if you get it on your skin with some acetone or something, which isn't healthy, but it's what you want to do before it. Or you can leave it on there, but it'll cure up on you, and it'll take a few days for it to come off. It'll be gross and get all dirty. Urethane foams can also be had like from Smooth On here in the two parts, yellow and blue, in like a gallon, and it's quite fluid, and you could mix up a certain amount. The expansion rate is relatively known, so you work up the volume that you're trying to create in foam. You mix up the appropriate volume in the liquid, you pour it in there and let it foam up and out, cure up, and then you can cast something. You can cast a mold or backfill something with the same type of foam, different formulation. So that being said, I'm not wearing gloves, and I'm I'm a foam all-star. You know what I mean? Watch me, famous last words. So I'm going to use the window and door again. I did also put these up. I had them on the floor like you saw, but I'm thinking that you'll see, if you can't tell already, this will afford me even more kind of versatility and volume in my shape. And I think what I'm trying to create here is something that would be fully upside down now. And so some kind of a stem or a stalk or whatever I may try to build up and create on the top of this. So you turn it around and you end up with something that wants to stand there. The other thing is creating in 360 degrees, a lot like the top, that crenellated top to that tower thing, allows me to cut it in half, because in theater, you almost always don't need the other half of anything. It's just the front part. So we'll end up getting two, essentially, or maybe even 3 or 4, depending on breaking them up if it looks cool, kind of usable pieces out of these. And using different sizes and stuff is just going to continue to break things up. So enough said, let's make a couple things on here. And one last thing, I guess, while I'm shooting, you can mist it with water. Water's what reacts with the urethane to cause the foaming. I believe it's either chemically making water in the reaction or otherwise the humidity is also a contributor. But if you want to encourage it to swell up even more, misting it with water will do the trick. You can also spray it or dip it and get different kind of texture effects. It'll still want to grow faster and cure faster. I'm also in this wood shop, which is almost always at least 5, if not 10 degrees warmer than the rest of the shop, especially this time of year, because I got a southern wall here, nice big windows. I get a greenhouse effect. It's dry in here, which doesn't help things. So again, I'm misting. I don't want to accidentally miss the tabletop to the table saw. So anyway, adding water has got some cool effects too. So let's build something now. Okay, so interestingly, as careful as you want to be about getting it on you or other things you don't want it on, it doesn't necessarily stick fast as it swells up out of the end of the hose or the tube to whatever surface. One of the more frustrating things about it is you kind of almost need it to be driven into the texture a little bit. So in really extenuating circumstances, I have shot it out into my gloved hand, smeared it all over something, and then built up on that the kind of form that I wanted, because that smeared layer really works as like a bonding layer. So I'm getting some like tumbling off the plastic here in a couple cases, whatever. I did miss this with water. I was hoping to get to both of these with one can, which didn't happen. And I think it's because I was looking for a bigger, bulkier form initially. So I ran a bunch more out onto this than was probably necessary. I think what I've got is the wrong foam. So we'll go with the big gap. So this will be an interesting test because I'm going to use the big gap on this over here. I want big, bulby kind of shapes. And I don't want that, you know, where I got some of that here. It looks cool, whatever. But it may not have been as effective as some of these more viney shapes. And so I'm able to do more viney, tenderly things that are more flexible and less breakable with the window and door. And so this is a case of like, I mean, I know a lot of this, but there's still a little bit of R&D to do. I want these things to be more bulbous, to kind of have big bulby kind of ends, relatively smaller, like branchy arms, come to a nexus, and then, like I say, have some kind of a stem. And you could be additive here. And so basically what I'm saying is I'm going to start and build what I want here, see if I can't get it to work a little bit better. I probably missed some of that. I'll come back where this has been misted, and I'll be additive with this different foam onto the watery kind of surface and see if I can supplement this. It'll be interesting to see if the flexible window and door bonded to the more rigid big gap is, you know, interesting or more resilient versus just straight up big gap. And, you know, there's a bunch of different tests that we can do with this as well as visually. And, you know, we haven't even gotten into using the black foam or anything else. So let me run some of this stuff out, try to supplement that, see how it is similar, how it's different. You can also, you know, you get all done if you got somebody helping you, because the surface kind of flashes pretty quickly. But if somebody's helping, you could throw sawdust or some other type of, like even styrofoam dust, any number of things into it, which end up becoming part of it, which end up becoming, you know, finished. You can finish that in, and you can do different textural things by being additive that way. So let's just run some more foam out. All right, I actually only got that far. It's a little misleading as compared to that first can. And these are actually old, so that's something you may want to consider. I've also got the ability to set the cans on a heater. Again, the area is warm, so there are things that you can use to your advantage. Also, being additive now. That's got some body and is set up, to some extent. Ooh, not as much as window and door. Window and door is considerably faster overall. So this was an hour ago or less, better part of an hour ago, but I peeled him off the plastic already. Some of the heavier areas are still a bit soft, leaving it, and in fact, I could mist the back now, which would help that all set up. Once again, you want to be aware that disturbing it, as I did here, when it was smooth, when I peeled the plastic off, it kind of collapses like a cake. So you've got those components to it. Now, none of this is as innovative as some may think. Great stuff. Again, I was eyeballing it when I was 10 for projects, and the haunt world, cheap special effects, even super pro grade. There's a place for it everywhere. Visually, like this, in renovation, obviously, all of that. It's got an excellent R value. It's a modified form that we're spraying in as spray foam insulation. There's all kinds. I mean, it's really, really an important technological advancement in all of these areas. However, one of the insidious things and one of the nice things about being in this room with it is that I can smell it a little bit in here, but it actually is really bad to be breathing it, especially over a long period of time consistently. I wanted to communicate, and I'm going to show you while I do this too, what I'm doing here. But you really don't want to be misled by the fact that you can't smell it easily, because there actually is quite a bit of VOC action going on. And it really is, you're much better off not breathing that. So anyway, so we can be additive here, and the ability to build and then fill voids, like establish what you want for this shape and that, and then between them just kind of tie everything together with this stuff. There's a bunch of really important and crafty kind of construction techniques that you can utilize or that you can employ. And, I'm not just that's what I'm trying to show too, is it's not just willy-nilly. I am kind of trying to look at this, and you can get some reference going if you need it. But, the forms that I'm trying to create, I'm utilizing different techniques, trying to get that to happen. I'm also physically trying to keep the most impactful areas of this construction are going to be these big blobby ends. And if they're all of them falling off on the floor, then not only am I not going to leverage that, but I'm also being wasteful. So again, and in layering, I can get some more 3D stuff. I've got some fundamental pairs of like veins or routes and stuff going on. But then if I can build on top of that in the center, I can get more of one half of what feels then like a more round kind of a thing, and I can get away from it looking like spray foam if I'm careful about what it is that I'm trying to do. So that's what's happening with the deployment here. I'm also on the misted water, so I'll leverage some of that. I also I gotta see how much of these things will stand on their own, because I've tied things together here a little bit. I'll try to let light through, make voids or maintain voids. However, there may be something and that's a situation where when I'm dealing with this after I've popped it off the plastic, if I need more structural stability somewhere or what have you, I can just build on it live, do it live. I'll write it, I'll make the foam of it, and, it'll do what we want it to do then eventually. And even to install it, when I come with these pieces to attach them, if I want to make sure that their transition into the set looks right or works visually, I can use some more to do the installation. And again here, trying to maximize what appears to be like a root ball, because again, organic shapes, this is coral, but of course we've seen, if we're paying attention in nature, that the fractal aspect to nature's forms is pretty neat. The same type of stuff happens at all different scales and across, this is a layout of a circulatory blood vessel type of a construction. It's the way plants grow, the way fungus and coral and everything else kind of has that look. And so I'm looking at this upside down too in my mind, and I'm seeing that this would be cool if I could get it to go over here and keep from falling down. In fact, in this case, I can, if I had two hands, I can pull the plastic out and let gravity coax it back on to there, and then try to give it some more structural integrity. And maybe more of these need a little bit of an extra spire on their end. And now that they can kind of be anchored by the stuff that's got a little setting up that it's done, we can tie something together that makes sense there, tie it up and around this perhaps. And if we don't, additionally, if you don't end up liking something that you chose to do, it can be broken off. This is probably not an ideal looking, thing, so we'll probably break him off. But what will that mean for the rest of it remains to be seen. And we get to the end of the can, and so we'll want to use kind of everything that we can. And again, I'm not the innovator necessarily, but I will stand on everybody else's shoulders when possible. And I may do something here that looks great, but isn't happening somewhere else once I get it turned around and upside down, and I can see that, maybe a few more of those are necessary, and I'll do that. But I'm going to keep going. Some projects, you only want to use what you need and leave the rest of the can around. That's another great point. I'm going to run this all out because it's going to make the most sense. When you can use the whole can effectively, just do it. It's the easiest thing. Just like caulk or adhesive, a lot of times, just use the whole thing. And again, we have more of a foundational base here, so I'll add a little bit more to this here. And I also want to get back to misting this with water. But anyway, use the whole can out if you can do it. It makes sense. And then if you want to be saving cans, actually the best thing that you can do are these simple tube dispenser ends. You can get those in bulk on Amazon. And that's kind of the best way. They make that new clog-free tip that comes on a lot of them. I actually try to avoid those cans as much as possible because it really doesn't work very well, and it's irritating, and it makes it more expensive, I think. The same type of foam, cost per cost, if it's in that special can, then they want more for the can itself. So buying in bulk is cheaper, yada, yada. And get the dispenser tube ends they make. It's a great way to leave that on now if I had some left in this can. And you could leave it a few months even in the right circumstances. And then when I'm ready, I spin this one off, put the fresh one on there. And that way the stuff that's in the very end here, I don't even expose it to air if I can help it, to try to prolong the reusability. However, again, utilize the whole thing if you can. And I wanted to remember to come back and mist this because I want this to kind of blow up as big as I can get it to. And I don't want to pass it and touch it, because especially the red can and the black can, they're kind of original formulations, very sticky the longest. And like I was saying, I'll get the back of this thing, and this is probably almost completely set up. It won't hurt to give it a little more moisture. In fact, this whole room is a little dry, so if it humidifies the room, so much the better. You can run a humidifier in your space. So I'm going to get out of here now, because I don't need to breathe any more of that than I need to breathe. Missed a few, and again, later on, if it's a good looking piece that's otherwise separate by accident, you can stick that on with some more foam. So let's come back and see these when we're getting them off the plastic and turning them around and see what we created. Kind of something like that, I guess. Okay, I gave this most of today in this, nice warm room. Ooh, it's a little sticky there. So, interesting. Why is that? Nothing else seems to be behind on the cure. So this is soft and flexible and therefore less prone to damage, but it also may not want to stand up on its own as much as I'm hoping that it will or would or could. Yeah, why didn't you cure right there, you silly goose? You silly goose. So that's a piece that's cured up that could be added eventually. I'm just popping it off the plastic here. Hopefully, I was thinking the area that would, if there was an area that wasn't going to be well cured, it'd be this biggest, topmost globular blob area. So, no, I think that there's something to be said for that. And I was also thinking the 2 or 3 different, I'll try to find an even smaller dome to build, but putting this within that and a smaller one within that, cutting the whole thing in half so you have 2 sets of several layers deep coral formation. Yeah, that one is a little bit too weak at the base. So you want to, take that forward And that's we're tying them together a little bit at the bottoms. But I think that's not the way that we're going to look at this thing. We're going to look at it more like this. And I think that works well. And this one here, if we didn't look at it before, is that's what you want. Even though it's not perfectly rigid, it would be too brittle if it were. So I could build up, or you can curve something flat like this can be curled or wrapped, or straight up built over a tube shape or a curl or whatever. So I may look at that. And then this one over here, I may give that over until tomorrow or maybe later tonight. Let's come back and give that a little more time. It seems as set up, but we'll just play it. Okay, so I'm trying to modify the rolling tree trunks to be different enough and therefore more like stone columns or naturally occurring stone columns. And I want to do it on the cheap, and I'm trying not to wreck their ability to be trees in the future. And so you could start by painting them a different color, but I think that the straight, smooth flatness of the sides, the perfect cylinder, was undermining the tree quality a little bit already, even though it's perfectly acceptable, I think, for theater. I want to expand on that kind of change and make it less of a perfect cylinder. And I started by, I'm not really to scale here, I'm roughly to scale. Obviously, paper towel tube, and then I laid out what is essentially the scooter base that I built from plywood with 3 points of contact for the caster wheels, and then I had 3 smaller circles at 60 degrees or whatever, thirds all the way around, and they made up that tree root ball kind of shape. And they were supposed to be a place where the counterweight could be used, but actually I ended up not needing the counterweight for these. So this is a pattern to scale for each of the 3 sized tubes that I have in plywood. So I'm able to remake this shape in plywood, basically. So I figured, well, I'll start there. And I'll make a bunch of them, and this is my idea. But I'm going to start by I stacked them up in bands, sawed them out, hand cutting them. It's going to be just janky. So I made a quick lamination by just wrapping the sides with tape. And it won't matter that I had to cut the circle out. But I'm going to get the one on the bottom, one on the top. And I think I'm going to put at least 2, if not maybe 3 or 4 in between there, and try to clock them. Because the thing is, this is it's mathematically a triangle from center to center to center in the large circle, center to center to center in the small circle, and they, like the Star of David. It's all very geometrically perfect in a sense. So basically, when we lay, and these aren't a faithful reproduction of that. Actually, the 2 larger circles sit on the floor without tipping on that smaller circle. And so I guess I didn't reproduce that well enough here. I don't think they do anyway. Yeah, maybe they do only sit on 2 points. In any case, when you lay it down on the stage, it registers and stops. And so if I'm going to put a few more pieces of plywood on here, I can actually kind of clock them and do a spin, and that's what I'm going to try to replicate here. So maybe like if the top and the bottom are in the exact same place, I think turning 360 degrees would be too much in a like a helical turn, and that's with the paper that I'm going to use between them. So I'm going to have to come up with an amount of spin to turn each one of them, and then when we put a new layer of paper on these, we'll go from, these are going to be basically bulkheads or lofted profiles. We'll go from bulkhead to bulkhead to bulkhead, attaching that paper, and we'll end up with something built outside of the bark with a hollowness between but that looks more interesting like stone. And then I've got other supplemental things that we can build and add to that, corals and different things like that to continue to break it up. Or in some cases, I can make openings in that paper and just finish the edge with great stuff foam and have like a kind of a tryptophobic kind of, pocky kind of a texture for a creepy look, maybe for, I keep wanting to say Elvira, but it's Ursula. So let me get a little bit farther with this prototype and see whether or not it's doing what I want us to get out of it before I go and do this at a large scale. Basically, this is a quick and dirty way of figuring out if it's going to look the way I want and work. Okay, so I've got some kind of scale brown butcher paper. That was a different pattern I tried rolling up. So I've been rolling it up around a long, small diameter and then crunching that roll all up to get the long kind of formations in the texture. And then I just started at one end and just laid it into that lumpy shape all the way along, as well as turning, and I'm going to apply all of them turning. So I'm trying to get the wrinkles to spin as well as the profiles spinning, and then I get the center section glued down, but these edges, need to be touched up in some cases, but I can get into there with the hot glue gun on one edge and on the other. So just getting the middle down all the way and then touching up the edges, and then I'm going to do the same thing. It looks like I'm going to need 2 more strips of paper, and then the edges from paper edge to paper edge need to be laid down, and then it can be trimmed flush on both ends, and we'll see what we get. I think it's going to work, but I don't actually know what it's going to look like just yet. Not bad. I think the scale of the wrinkles in the paper is too large. But for prototyping purposes, the nice thing about this is it's still loaded axially pretty vertically. You don't accidentally build out something that's hanging out in any particular orientation other than kind of 90 degrees normal to the surface of the stage. That can work against you under certain circumstances, and it would be the next level of this idea is to create these in such a way where you use CAD to plan the location of the center circle and the shape on the outside, and those bulkheads, their location on that cylinder, and their clocked orientation. And if you plan that in CAD, then when you skin it with paper, it can wander off and back, or wander off and continue to wander off in a planned way, basically. This stuff is too big to be standing there with a poker table sized piece of plywood like this and a 14-foot tall column, and to try to do that at full scale, I think would be an approach that is doable, but it's going to take more time and energy than just getting it, either plan it in small scale that way, or rely on CAD. So this is a safe thing. I've made the investment of laying out these shapes for these different tubes. They exist in plywood. I can trace and cut more of them. I can cut several at a time since they're all the same. When they start getting different and different things, it starts really adding up in terms of all the cost of the time and energy spent. So I'm trying to minimize that for this show, but maximize the return on the investment. So we're going to have to find some scraps, and the thing is, these don't have to be made in one piece. Once I have the template, I can find some of what I need and kind of chew through some of the plywood scraps that we have, if we have any, first, before we get full sheets. Because one of the unfortunate things with these is that I probably only get, I forget how many. The smaller ones, I get more out of a full sheet of plywood. The large ones, I think you only get 2. So I think maybe the medium ones, you might be able to get 3 out of a sheet of plywood, doing it like that. And the smalls, you might be able to do 4. I can't remember. So if we're using what I used 5, 1 is already on each tree. So we're adding 4 with this plan. And if it gets to be too not enough registration, we would need more. So I don't think we're going to do this with the 2 largest columns, which is a savings. So if we're going to put 4 additional pieces like this onto the small columns, that would mean if we can get 4 out of a sheet of plywood, 2 extra sheets of plywood there. And if we can only get 3 out of a sheet of plywood for the medium-sized column, we're obviously going to need 3 sheets of plywood there. So that's 5 or 6 sheets of plywood, and you kind of want it to be 3/4 inch. Unfortunately, because we're looking for a wide enough edge to staple to. We can use 1/2 inch, I suppose, but you also need to kind of anchor it on the tube somehow, which I think will end up screwing blocks onto the side of this and then screwing through those blocks into the sidewall of the column. So that, and that'll probably mean that I leave this hole nice and spacious so that we can slide over the bark texture without ruining it. And there's some other things here where I might try to cut these in half and put every one of them on, even if I make them out of, actually, that's the thing. Yeah, I may deliberately lay them out as halves. But if we're clocking them, what my goal was to make 2 halves of this stone texture that can be, once it's built up on here, it could be separated and taken off and set aside and utilized another time, use the trees, and then put this back on in case we want to do that. But that would mean the halfway point would also walk around the tree. Maybe not the end of the world. It bears more thought. I want to make sure that we don't invest and then just throw everything away because we didn't do anything to make it usable again. So there's some steps here, but I think first I'm going to glue down all the edges of the paper and try to make a more refined thing out of this and see how it looks. All right, we're on the stage. We're back to work, and we're going to make some tree trunks into more like stone columns, at least a couple of them. These have been used to with crenellated tops to imply like a castle column on the outside. Better for, you know, Monty Python or Shrek or something, where it doesn't have to be, it's taken far less seriously. For this show, believe it or not, for Little Mermaid, I'm going to take those off of there, and we'll imply different locations inside of the palace with these columns on this side. And essentially, it's implied that we're in a regularly proportioned structure, less fantastic, a little bit, believe it or not. A little less of a lampoon to the genre with this show, and a little more realistic, I guess what you would say. So, and we're also going to embrace a far heavier texture on some of these other ones, and then, you know, along the lines of this prototype that I've been working on, and I think it's going to work out. I've had them out on stage for rehearsal. I've seen the proportions, and it's doing kind of what I want it to do. How will we supplement this with corals and barnacles and other, you know, organic things? And so I'm working on those corals at home. I've got these barnacles that I built up on balloons, and I just sort of spray mount, stuck the balloons together in kind of a group, and built up and around to create those. Just pop the balloons afterward like you would a piñata. And over here I did some like spindly little sort of construction. Now I just was holding it. If we're going to utilize this technique, which I think is going to be cool because we light the cyc and we have projections and stuff on it. So the backlighting through things like this is going to be really cool, I think, too. So bigger balloons, more attention to the assembly, more attention to the anatomy, multiple phases of application of the foam so that it doesn't melt down into itself as much. I just wanted to see, I didn't want to go to a lot of trouble and put that much more foam in, take even more time with the drying of multiple phases of application to find out when you pop the balloon, it would just collapse. So I've proved this out now. I could even build on those a little bit. You can also put a balloon in each one, turn it upside down, and then build down and onto those shapes a little bit. Let it set up like that, and then pop those and have more of a cup that reaches up and out. And then you could build on that to make a pillowy surface on it again, rather than the surface that casts against the balloon. So, you know, we can use feathers, big ostrich feathers, come out through those maybe, like they're filtering the food, and then pull back through there with some puppeteering. Lots of different options there. So I'm happy about that. And then we've also got, now I had this idea with the legs, the curtain legs, they pivot at the top. And I thought, well, we could build up the edge of them carefully with something like magnetically stuck to itself on either side of the fabric, or very carefully stitch it with small black thread, and then we could turn them around and bring them in, or turn them around and basically trim the edges of the portal, trim the edges of the space. Not really a portal and not really a proscenium, but just some sort of scenery on the edges of the show. So that we're not going to pursue because I've got these awesome rolling walls that we built, these sleeves that we put over the steel frames for Matilda. The frames are smaller and they worked well for hospital walls. And then in a scene change, they slid these envelopes that are glue-on with some ripped up dimensional lumber. The bookshelves are further kind of 3/4 inch material. We had it already. I would have probably anyway, it's a bit thicker and heavier, but we had it and it worked out nicely that way. However, we can build on the edge of these and actually build up a ways, and they can sneak out past the leg to be seen and sneak back, and they don't take up a lot of space, and they can be driven right, away and packed up off stage. So I think we're going to try trimming our underwater scenes with one edge of these, and maybe even just put some of the same texture that's on the column, the side of the column that we're going to use in the palace. Put some of that same texture on those and push them in when we're at the palace. Try to maximize the scenery cohesiveness without building all kinds of exhausting amounts of scenery. Whereas this is a visually spectacular show, a lot of costuming, a lot of lighting. It's kind of funny. So we want to fill out the set, but we don't want to go overboard building a bunch of unique things if we can help it. So that's our sort of tack. We're going to need a door for inside the palace, so we'll utilize my rolling door that we've been using for over almost 10 years, I guess, not quite. I think maybe like 8 years. It's showing a little bit of its age. It's been painted quite a bit, but it still works really nicely, and so that'll help us get into like Ariel's room at the palace and any other place we need to be on land. So yeah, that stuff's looking good. What's next? So 2 years ago for Shrek, I made a big complicated piece of the top of Fiona's tower, as though it had been cut off and was standing there on the stage. And so the foundation of that was this big 2-layer plywood 7-foot diameter circle. And so it's 4 sheets, 2 one direction, 2 the other direction, laminated with wood glue and very carefully cut out. And so we made use of it last year. I put the 3 big holes in it because when it was the tower, we just mounted casters to it, and I brought a skirt down to the floor to obscure them. For last year, it was a big circular throw rug in the middle of Matilda's house, which is why it's yellow on the other side. So it actually just set really close to the ground, and I put the caster wheels in pots, just as I put them in baking pots under these, so that we keep the surface close to the floor. However, all of these have got 3-inch casters, and so the pot is 5 inches deep. Since the caster is measured by the wheel diameter, then there's the additional height. And so all of these that we owned were so tall, when they came through that plywood, there were 3 or 4 inches that stuck up on the top. It's supposed to look like a rug, already kind of too thick. But then the pot stuck way up here to allow for that big caster wheel. So since then I bought some shallow pots, some small wheels, and another issue that we had was the square foot of the caster wheel. You're loading the weight, 1/3 of everything's weight on there, since there were 3 wheels. 1/3 of it was on the square foot of the caster, and these are aluminum pots. And then that load's translated out to the edge of the pot where it fits through the plywood. So we were pushing up that square foot and making a dome out of the aluminum, and that meant the edges of the pot were getting closer to the floor, and then it was scraping, and so we had some issues. So several solutions there. I'm going to use 6 points of contact over 3, so we'll put 3 more openings in. I might even put one in the middle, but that remains to be seen. So we're going to divide the point load on every one of the wheel locations, and we went with shallower pans, and I had these plates cut from steel. Probably could have been 1/8 inch steel, but I went with 3/16, and that will it's getting laminated up inside there, or bolted up flat in a sandwich. Now I'm only using 2 bolt positions, but they're nice and snug, and I got the lock washers on there. It's good enough for our purposes, so it helps save us some hardware cost. So I'm going to bolt everything up like that, then make 3 more openings in there, and then pop all 6 of them in between the steel plates and the point load being cut in half of any given 2 or 3 people and their weight that's on that piece. We're probably in way better shape and visually still really low key. And we're going to use that really low slung large circular scooter, basically now, for any number of things in the future, but for this show, it's going to have the big basking rock coming off one side of it for aerial, and that will make the surface of the stage kind of like the surface of the water. So the rock will come right up and off of that, and I'll show you that when we get to it. And then on the other side of it, there may be a way to utilize that for something else. It may come down to being this one side of a boat, a rowboat, for Kiss the Girl. I'd rather do the rowboat in a different way, but it's a nice solution if we have to utilize the other side of it for something. There are other things that we might be able to do with it, so we'll have to see. But I think that for as much surface area as it takes a footprint on the floor, I think we need it to play at least double duty. So again, the basking rock, and then we're going to come up with another use for that. So we're getting some fundamental things up here on stage, rolling around, using them for rehearsal, blocking around them, and I'm going to get to work on some logistical things like getting all these wheels mounted up, stuff like that. And we're going to continue to prototype, and we've got some really good pricing on great stuff, so we're going to get some cases of that. And we just want to be wise. I'm going to keep all the cans that we use, both for prototyping and for the show in general, in one bin, and we'll come out, get a photograph of them, get some sense of how much material here and there when I know, for example, there's 2 cans in this, a can there. So some sense along the way, but overall, the total cost and great stuff, because it's a relatively pricey material, and I know people, it's not a new idea to use it, but how much does it actually cost to rely on it, and what's the return on investment? What would it have been like without all the things that we build for this show with it? How could we have possibly done them with a different material? And, was it worth that in the end? So we'll find that stuff out too, so stay tuned. So I just want to point out that I have all my nice wobble head wrenches that are, relatively decent quality, just for situations like holding the other side of that bolt. And of course, the one size that I need, I know exactly where I left it. I've got to do this with Croissant, the world's oldest Armstrong, made in USA. Well, massively irritating. Classic theater tools, just massively irritating. Sometimes people think this is all overkill, but every little step of the way, just holding this adjustable wrench to keep this from spinning while I tighten everything else with a socket is driving me absolutely nuts.